How are the hangovers? Okay? Excellent. I'm hoping this is kind of a good spot for me. Everybody's just coming out of that hangovers, but they haven't hit lunch and got kind of sleepy yet. So hopefully we'll get through this together. My name is Richard Erwin. I am billed as a technology solutions professional. That doesn't really mean anything to anybody outside of Microsoft, but essentially I get to help our clients with their mobile DevOps solutions. So looking at the tools that they're using, looking at their automation, and looking at the process kind of end to end, how they're kind of driving their projects and getting them out there into the store. I thought I'd start with this slide. If you've seen any kind of DevOps presentation from Microsoft probably in the last couple of years, you've probably seen this slide. In fact, probably the first couple of slides. What we're trying to get across here is if I asked everybody in this room what is DevOps, what's the definition of DevOps, I'd probably get a different answer from every single person. And if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see people saying, I'm a DevOps engineer. People are recruiting for DevOps engineers and DevOps teams. And you hear people talking about their DevOps tools and so on. But it's not just about that one thing. If you've probably seen any sessions from Microsoft, you've probably seen Donovan Brown. Anybody seen him speak? Very good, quite an entertaining speaker. Apparently is a semi-professional air hockey player, so he tells me. And so he's got quite a good definition. And I think it sums up this quite nicely. So DevOps is a union of people, process, and products or tools to enable continuous delivery of value to our customers. And I think that's pretty good thing. So you look at those three things. You've got people, process, and tools. Without one, you can't really do DevOps. So there's no point in saying, oh yeah, we bought some DevOps tools and we're going to go and do automation now. We're going to do automated testing or automated release. If the guy who essentially does the database deployment isn't on board with this, then it's not going to happen. If the testing team and the dev team don't work together, this isn't going to happen. We need the people, we need to streamline the process through our release, and that's involving all the people in that process. So we see a lot of the time, the people who are doing deployments to say it could be into Azure, it could be a deployment onto an on-premise server. The people who are doing those deployments typically aren't the people who wrote the code. So they will have a document produced by the dev team that says, okay, when you deploy this, I want you to deploy this service, I want you to run this script, I want you to put this database, I want you to update that table, and there is essentially a checklist of the things that they do. And so at 3 in the morning, the guys are in, they're doing this, and of course, they have this learned knowledge, and they kind of know what's going on. But then the guy who normally does the deployments, the manual deployments, isn't there that week. And so we still try and push out. We've got the script, it's fine. And then they'll follow through the script. And then what you'll find is maybe just the name of something has changed. Maybe this something is in a different place. We store it. And the person running through that script, they'll go, oh, we'll just follow it as it says on the script. And of course, something goes wrong. Because the person who is doing it manually has this assumed knowledge and go, okay, I know that we don't use that script, we use this one instead. And so the whole thing goes wrong. They don't really understand what it is they're deploying. And so therefore, we have an issue, we have to roll it back, and it costs us lots of time and effort. So that's kind of what we want to get away from. I thought I'd start with a little DevOps journey story. So this is one I've been sort of reasonably close to. This is the Microsoft Developer Division. Now, it's a big team. There's over 4,000 devs working on that team. And of course, this is .NET, this is Visual Studio, this is Azure Services, this is ASP.NET, all that stuff, a lot of developers working on this stuff. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Visual Studio Team Services, and there's about 400 or so developers working on that team. So we take a little bit of history here. The developer division in about 2008. Is anybody a Team Foundation server user in here? Yeah, got a few in there. Oh, excellent. Good. Okay. So you may have been looking at that, and obviously we had a release in 2005, 2008, 2010, 13, and so on. And Around 2008, the developer division really started to embrace agile, and you may have noticed some of the agile tools coming into the product shortly after that. And so they started doing things like looking at their technical debt, doing essentially releasable code as part of their sprints, working an agile process. So this trained everybody up in Scrum, and it was a multi-year journey, probably 6 or 7 years as they adopted that process. But they saw a 15 times reduction in their technical debt. It's a real focus on quality. No longer this kind of, we'll design what we're going to do, we'll build it, and then we'll test it. And we're testing things that we wrote 6 months ago. We're trying to get around that kind of problem. So by 2010, they released Visual Studio 2010, TFS 2010, and it was very well received. They were hitting all the kind of top right-hand quadrants of the analyst reports. There were some great features in there, things like a new build system. They brought in things like test case management. There was lots of new features in that. It was a real shift from 2008 to 2010. It was being very well received. But at that point, they decided that really what they needed was a software as a service solution. So they started working on what has now become Visual Studio Team Services. At them was called TFS Service Preview and became Visual Studio Online at one point as well. So they started working at this, and of course, they'd never really built a software as a service product before as the developer division. And so they really started thinking about their DevOps process. How were they going to release this thing? How were they going to keep up to date, continually releasing in an agile manner? So they started adopting things like they got a version out there, I think about 2012, they got the first service preview out, and they were doing things like taking a lot of telemetry about what was running. And so if you look at an agile project, the product owner is God. They decide what's on the backlog, what we're going to work on, and what's important, and so on. They work in the prioritization. If you look at more of a DevOps team, they're taking telemetry. What are our customers using? What are they liking? What feedback are we getting? What's working? What isn't working? And that's the kind of information that's driving the backlog of what we work on. So what our customers want, that's what we're going to deliver. And so they started working on things like pulling a lot of telemetry from Azure. They were doing things like feature flags, so they could just kind of lift the skirt for some of their users and let them see this new stuff that was coming out. And that was great. So by Visual Studio 2013, I think was November 13th, 2013, they released VS 2013, TFS 2013, but also released the commercial terms for what was then Visual Studio Online. So effectively, they had about 1 million users on VSO on the preview at that point, and they said, okay, on the November 13th, right, you can buy that thing, you can start using it, big fanfare announcement. But they had a bit of a perfect storm. They announced the time of the marketing announcement was that point where the US was online and also Europe was online, so they had a lot of potential users. They also chose that moment to release essentially a lot of feature flags. So they had a lot of stuff that had kind of been going on, a lot of new features, and they thought, why not? We'll get those released right at this moment. And of course, what then promptly happened, they immediately suffered a 7-hour outage of the service. So that's kind of not what you want. You've just announced this thing, and it's down for most of the day. Rather than kind of hide from that, they actually produced a white paper. You can go and download it. It's Microsoft's Journey to Cloud Cadence. It's actually a very good read. They talked about what caused the outage, why it happened. It turned out they essentially had only one scale unit at that time. So now VSTS is hosted all over the world. There's some in Amsterdam, I think, a few in the US. They had only one at that stage. And they also were missing some telemetry and how the various services of VSTS communicated between them. They also got a massive influx of users and launched these new features as well. So basically, perfect storm, and they brought the thing down. So they then have published all the kind of process around how they resolve that, how they now do canarying. So essentially, they've got a new feature at the end of the sprint. We're going to push out some new features. We'll push it out to one of our scale units. We'll make sure we test it, we use it. If everything goes well, great. Then we'll push it out to the rest of the world. If not, then we're going to roll that thing back, or rather, probably not roll back, but roll forward, mediate the problem. So they they learned a lot over those couple of years in their DevOps practices. They produced this as well. This is the kind of practices and habits that they drive as a team. And you see a lot of things there that we've talked about before. Flow of customer value, a production-first mindset. So essentially, we are building something, assuming that is going to go in production. It's not a case of, we'll build it, and then we'll deploy it into our QA server, and we'll find out maybe if it works. So what I really want to talk about, we can't cover all of that. I'm not going to talk about scaling agile and so on. I want to talk about things like CI, CD, automated testing, release management, some of the telemetry, collecting data as well, and stakeholder feedback. So those are the kinds of things I want to talk about today. So why do we do DevOps? Effectively, probably number one is we want to increase the quality of our product and reduce our technical debt. We don't want to be spending our time fixing bugs. I mean, I saw a project just the other week, and they were using probably more of a waterfall kind of process. So we decided what we were going to build, we signed a contract, we built the thing, we had it delivered, we put it out there, and of course it is horribly full of bugs. They have an entire backlog now of bugs. I'd never seen this before, but there is nothing on their backlog apart from bug fixing. And that, as a developer, must be a very depressing thing. So we want to avoid that. We want to think about quality as we go through the development. We're going to accelerate our development and release cycles, take away that dependency on that one person who does that one part of the manual deployment. Let's get it automated and automate as much as we can. Take some of the pressure off our testers. Again, if we're doing app development here, probably 9 out of 10 teams will do mainly manual testing. Manual testing is slow. It takes a long time. We want to try and automate as much of that as possible. The other kind of key thing is we want to innovate. Now, in mobile, this is especially true. We want to be doing the cool things, doing the things that our customers want, and essentially, if we need to change something, if something's not quite right in our product, we need to be able to pivot, and we need to be able to build that new functionality in very quickly and get it out there. And without some automation, we can't do that. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that are probably more specific to mobile development. Obviously, that's why we're here. And there are mobile quality challenges. There are challenges that are reasonably unique to mobile. Probably the number one thing is device fragmentation. So if you are developing for Android, there are a huge amount of devices, versions of the operating system, various flavors, customizations of Android that will be out there. So your customers will be coming along, taking your app and deploying it in some bargain bucket 4-inch screen Android device. And then somebody else will be coming, running that in a brand new Google Pixel XL, whatever it's called. And does my application work on both of those devices? It's less of a problem in iOS, but it's getting worse. There are a lot more form factors coming out. We've got our Mac, iPad minis. We've got our, even back to iPods as well, or people using iPod touches to grab your app. The other thing is high expectations, short sessions. If you're anything like me, you'll think, well, I was looking for something the other day. It was a video player on my Android device, which would allow me to watch something in 1.5 times speed. Didn't seem to be able to do that with the default player, so I hit the App Store. I grabbed the top rated free video player that was on there. I installed it. I tried to watch my Channel 9 video on the train. It wasn't doing what I wanted to do. It got about, I would say, 30 seconds before I went, okay, uninstall, next one down the list, and I moved on to that. So you basically have to get this right because your window of opportunity is so small. And of course, I didn't personally do this, but what would everybody do? 1-star review. Didn't work on my OnePlus 3 device. Horrible. People are crazy on reviews on App Store, so it's something to bear in mind. Okay, one more slide, and then we'll get on, take a look at some cool stuff. So if you are feeling a little bit snoozy after the party last night, if you take nothing else away from this session, apart from this slide, then you're probably fine. You can go and relay it to your boss, and he will think you went and paid attention at the conference. Microsoft acquired Xamarin last year, all finalized around the summer. They also bought a company called Hockey App, probably most of you have heard of. I think it was a couple of years ago, actually, we brought them in-house. And in addition to the existing DevOps and application lifecycle management tool sets that Microsoft already had, they've kind of plumbed this all together into a fairly unique proposition, end-to-end mobile DevOps. So if we look at this, the first thing up, Visual Studio Team Services. Now, some of you, and I could have put Team Foundation Server on there, it doesn't really matter. If you haven't come across that, Visual Studio Team Services is essentially the cloud-hosted version of Team Foundation Server. Those tools are there to track your mobile projects, or any project for that matter. It gives me my agile planning tools. It gives me things like automated build, test case management, defect tracking, and lots more other stuff as well. Continuous integration, continuous delivery. We'll take a look at a lot of that stuff. It's a very, very good tool. If you're looking at build and deployment, obviously as essentially a Xamarin employee, I would encourage you to go and check out the Xamarin platform. If you're doing hybrid development, you know, what we really want to see is native applications. If you're developing in a hybrid application, you're missing a bit of a trick. Your customers are wanting the features. They want their kind of fingerprint reader. They want to have their offline sync. They want that good experience that you're only going to get with a native application. So what we think is a very good solution is the Xamarin Platform. Hopefully some of you are Xamarin developers here. And there's a couple of choices there. You can use essentially Xamarin Native. I might get around maybe 60-70% code reuse. I'm going to write my app in C#. You've also got Xamarin Forms, which could give you maybe 90 to 100% code reuse, depending on if you're wanting some platform-specific features. Worth checking that out. There's probably been some sessions already. I saw one on MVVM earlier this week. I don't know if there's any left. But the other aspect is the Azure mobile app services. If you haven't checked out the app services, some great stuff for scaling your websites, for hosting your APIs, so the API app services, but also the mobile app services. So things like, as we said, offline sync, authenticating with your Microsoft account, your Google account, your Facebook account. I want to send notifications to my iPhone users and also my Android users and even my Windows users if there are any around. And so I want to use something, the Application Hub, and be able to send my notifications and spread it out to the various notification services. There's lots of great stuff in there to make your life easier and make your app better. There's a very good session. Unfortunately, it's the very last one of the day, possibly in here, on using Azure for mobile. Well worth checking out if you have a chance and can make it through the rest of the day. That's my colleague Richard Hopkins and Mike James, one of our evangelists. Well worth checking out. The other thing where I spend a lot of my time is in mobile app testing in Xamarin Test Cloud. Now, we're going to check this stuff out, but if you haven't seen this before, again, if I'm testing my application, I'm doing some automation, and some of you may already be doing it, maybe XCUI test, Calabash, Espresso. There's a lot of frameworks out there that you might be using, and that's fine. You test it on the devices that you have in your pocket or the devices you have kicking around in a drawer in the office. But we're all techies here. We all typically have sort of reasonably high-end phones. We keep them up to date. And perhaps our app works absolutely fine on those. But what about those little bargain bucket Android devices? Maybe if you're infant like my wife, you've got an iPhone, you've never updated it in its life. I have to come along and do it for her. So it'll be running whatever it was born with effectively. What about those devices? So the devices that your users are accessing your app with. So the idea of the Xamarin Test Cloud is it's about 2,500 physical devices in a warehouse, a data center, and it allows you to spray out your app to those devices as many as you want, then run your automated tests, and then give you that feedback about what's happening. We'll take a look at that stuff. Very cool indeed. You've got Hockey App for beta distribution. So again, getting your pre-release app out into the hands of your users. Get the feedback from them, find out what's crashing, find out what they're using. And again, the telemetry data. So if we're looking at the front end, we're using Hockey App for those crash analytics, user metrics, and if the user wants to give you some feedback, they can click a button, send it your way. If you're doing something in the back end, something like Azure Application Insights, track that information again. What are people making use of? So that's great. You look at that, and that's a pretty much a nice rounded set of tools that will help you drive your project. Now you're all sitting there going, yeah, you know what, I use Jenkins for my build, we use Bitrise, you know, we've got Jira installed, you know, we use the Google Device Cloud, something like that. Well, that's fine. Don't pick that. You know, maybe we don't do Xamarin development. That's fine. You've got your native application, you can absolutely do that as well. Any part of this, you can roll back, you can plug in your own tool. So if I take it all back, you go and use something like Raygun Fabric to get that crash analytics. Fine, go for it. That's no problem. You can use the rest of it. Something like beta distribution. You want to use Test Flight for your iOS apps. Maybe something the beta distribution in the Play Store. Again, absolutely fine. Make VSTS drive that stuff to there. Maybe you're not using Xamarin Test Cloud. Using something like Perfecto Mobile, the Amazon Device Farm. If you're building application in Java, React Native, Objective-C or Swift, or you're using a different backend, so Google Cloud, I think those guys are right there, again, that's fine. You can pick and choose the bits that you want. And of course, in VSTS, you can stick in there. I was thinking of what people might be using for tracking their projects, and you get a lot of Jira, very good tool. People using maybe things like Trello, Fogbugs, Excel, Post-it notes. That's fine. You can't really integrate your Post-it notes, but it's getting there. And again, build services, use whatever you want. So hopefully my job is to show you how well this is all integrated in and how easy it is to get up and running with it. And quite often, you can use for free. But if you're using something already and you want to integrate it, that's absolutely fine. So let's check it out. And we're just about on time. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to show you here. So let's flip across to my Visual Studio Team Services. So if you haven't seen this, this is the cloud-hosted version of Team Foundation Server. I kind of get the feeling this is where most people are going. There seems to have been a bit of a tipping point. You know, it was TFS all the way, on-premise. I'm going to build my server. I'm going to customize it. I'm going to come in there and get my ops team to upgrade it to the next version every couple of years. I'm seeing a bit of a tipping point where people are saying, do you know what? I don't want to have to do that upgrade again. Let's go to VSTS. There's very good migration options there. If you haven't checked it out, it's worth having a look at. What we're looking at here, obviously, is VSTS. This is the latest tooling. There's the latest features in there. If you've got TFS 2015, everything I'm going to show you will work exactly the same. That's fine. The only difference here, if you go back to TFS 2013, you won't have the Git support and you won't have the same build engine. You can still do it, but it's a little bit trickier. So at least get yourself to 2015 if you're on premise. So we've got our VSTS, and this is just a little project I've set up, and we've got a couple of things we want to check out. First of all, we need to go and check out our backlog. So I'm going to just go to my work tab here, and we'll go and check out our backlog. Now, this is just as you might use in any agile planning tool. This is the backlog of the things that we need to do. And I can come along and say, okay, well, we have some work here. It's in a certain state. It is, we've given it so many story points. It's got so much business value. I can drag and, I always do that on my Mac for some reason. I can drag and drop and without force clicking to say what's the most important thing. I can start to plan my sprints. You can see over here, I've got some sprints set up, and I can start to drag things into my sprints and go ahead and do that. That's fine. I can set up my agile portfolio, so where I'm going to break my minimal marketable features down into my backlog items, and I'm going to make sure that I just concentrate on the bare minimum value that we can give to our customers. So again, if you're doing agile, if you're doing Scrum, there's some great tooling in there. I've also got my boards. So again, that's fine, I'm going to leave that. If you're using something like maybe Lean Kit Kanban or Trello boards and so on, why not have this hooked into your backlog? Why track two different things? So I can say, in fact, let's go and add a new item here. Let's add a product backlog item, and we'll go, we'll put in NDC demo. There we go. So I've now got a thing in there. I can open that up, I can give it an effort value, and this doesn't feel like work, we just give it 1 because it's nice and easy. And business value, we can stick it in there if we want. Say, look at our return on investment, let's go for a 10 in there, and we'll save and close that. And maybe, I'll go and assign it to myself, but yeah, let's do that. If I can click my thing properly. I'm still getting used to my Mac, There we go. There we go. So save and close that. I've got that in there. It's something we need to do. It's our candidate story. So, we come along and say, what, that's fine, that's approved. Let's put this into development. We're doing this now. I'm breaking all the rules by having 2 things in progress at once that I'm supposed to be doing, but we'll not worry about it too much. And, I can come in here, I can add my, my tasks in here. So I can say, to do this, I've got to go, let me see, demo, Xamarin Test Cloud. We could add another one, which is, I don't know, let's say demo hockey app. We can say mobile sender. So we can throw some tasks in there. These are essentially pieces of work that need to be done. I can open them up and give it more information about what that is, or I can just use it as a tick box. Say, what, let's do that. That's more important. Let's go and do that. We've done that. It's good. And again, I've got that. I've got my things like my cumulative flow diagram and so on. If you haven't played around with this, it's very good. You can get a lot of use out of that. So let's flip over to code. If you're using something like Jira, that's fine. Don't worry too much about it. All right. So I'm going to go to my code here. I need to get some code into this now. In VSTS and TFS 2015. You can choose between TFVC, Team Foundation Version Control, which is a centralized version control system. If you're coming from older versions of TFS or Subversion or, God forbid, SourceSafe, that's absolutely fine. You'll be quite at home with that stuff. But if you're coming from GitHub, Bitbucket, or just, you've got your own Git server, then why not have a Git repo within your VSTS project, linking up the work that you have to do with the code that you're changing. So I might say, let's go and let's import a repo. I can go, I'm using a sample app here called Acquaint. You can go and get this as a fully kind of featured Xamarin sample app, talks to Azure. I can just say, what, give me the URL for that. I'll flip over to my project. I'll throw it in there. And if the wireless is good enough, then it's just going to go and start to do that. It's just pulling it in from GitHub, just cloning that repo for me. It's going to stick it into my project. Absolutely good. I can start setting up a build. I won't wait for that. Oh, it's going to do it pretty quickly anyway. And so we've now got some code. Now I can bring that down to my local machine. I can set up my branches, whatever I need to do. So there we go. It's in. So now I have another branch in here. I'm going to stick with my Acquaint branch that's I made a few tweaks to. And so that's fine. We've got some code in there. The next thing we want to do, we've got that code. We want to make sure that it's building. So we're going to set up a build. Now, again, very, very easy. People get a little bit jumpy with automated builds. It's, can be kind of tricky to configure. So I'm just going to go to my build. I'll just go with a new build definition. I love this dialog because you look at this and we go, yeah, you know what? I don't really use any of that Microsoft stuff for my mobile dev, but you look at this and you say, okay, I want to build template. I want to just a starting point of what it is I want to build. And we start to see things like Android and Ant and Gradle and Jenkins and Maven and Node.js and so on. You go, oh, wait a minute, what's that doing in a Microsoft product? You can build essentially what you want. Or if it's not on the list, just build your own extension for that. Of course, I've got things like Universal Windows Platform, Visual Studio, I've got my Xamarin builds, and then right down the bottom, I've got my Xcode builds. So you can build what you want. It's just Git. You stick your code in there, and then you can kick off a build and build what you need to build. So I'm going to choose Xamarin Android just for now. And then a couple of things I need to give it. Number one, where am I getting this code from? So again, hopefully it's from VSTS, so it'll be sitting in your team project in a particular repo, in a particular branch. But if it's not, if you want to go off to GitHub, that's fine. If you've got your own Git server, you want to give it that. If for some reason you're still using Subversion, that's fine. You can use that too. So I'm going to pull in my code. In this case, I'm just going to go, let's use my Acquaint repo. I'm going to just leave it on the master branch. I can set up continuous integration, as simple as that. So when I commit some code, push some code to the server, it's going to kick off a build for me. And then I've got the option of where that build is going to happen. Now, if you're doing a normal Visual Studio build, a cloud project, an ASP.NET website, whatever it might be, then you can very, very easily use the hosted build. For my Android build, my Xamarin build, I can still use that hosted build. That's a build agent running in the cloud. It's got lots of software on there. I can hook it into most things, and that's fine. You get, I think you get one build agent for free with, I don't know, like a 30-minute limit maybe on that without buying anything more. So you can do that. You can go and build. However, if I want to build an iOS project and I've got, I'm targeting my iPhone and so on, then I need to have a Mac build agent. Now, you can go and buy something like Mac and Cloud and so on, but typically what I do is I have it running on my local machine. So I just have a build agent running on-premise, which then says, okay, when I kick off a build, it builds it here, and then just submits all the results back to the VSTS project. So this one here, default, is essentially my machine. It's a different pools. So I can choose that. I'm going to take this off so it doesn't mess up my other build. I can go and create that, and then there's a couple of things I just need to plug in. So it gives me, by going through it there, I've got a number of tasks which I need to just give some data. But essentially, it's going to build an Android project. Now, I don't have any Xamarin components. I'm going to pull those out. I'm going to say, okay, go and find a solution in that repo, and go and decide what NuGet packages I need to restore. And if I want, I can go and specify this. This app actually has a Xamarin Native and a Xamarin Form solution. So maybe I'm saying, look, go and get the forms. That's what we want to build. That's what we want to get. Let's go and grab it. Then I'm going to build my Android project. So there's obviously an Android project within that solution. It's going to build that for me. That's fine. I can make some changes here and add some specifics if I want. But in general, it's just going to find that project and build it. Then I've got a test project, so all my good UI tests I'm going to have as well, or all my unit tests that I've written. Fine, go and build those up. Maybe go and run my unit tests. I'm going to come back to the test cloud. And then, of course, as it's a mobile project, I want to sign it up. I want to run zip-align against it. And then I want to take that APK file and all the associated files that I need and just publish them onto the server. So later on, I can grab the output of that build and use it in a release or manually download it and work with it. So as simple as that. I save that build, and I'll just give it a name. Unless, of course, I completely screw that up. There we go. Just give it a name and save OK. And that is it. I could kick that off now. It'll go off and do it if check my little build agent is running. There we go. Agent reconnected. So you can see I have this just running as essentially just installed running in a terminal window. I can run it as a service. You can have this running on a Windows box. It doesn't really matter. So I could kick off that build and it'll go off and it'll give me some data. What I'm going to do is, I think, I'm going to set up a different build. So if I go to builds here, I have one set up already here that I'm going to use. My Quint Android CI build, which does build, test, and sign. And that's what I want to use. I'm going to go through that in a second. But you're sitting there thinking, I don't use the VS build. I don't want to use that. I want to use my existing build system. Absolutely fine. If you want to set up a Jenkins build, but kick it off here. So you're using your CI process. I'm storing it in VSTS, but I want to send that information off to Jenkins. I want then to run my test, my end unit test, whatever it might be, send all the information back to VSTS, store that in one place. Absolutely fine. Something I was doing just the other day was with Bitrise, very popular mobile build service. It's free, I think, again, for maybe one concurrent build or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is. I just signed up for a free account. And you can see here, I've set it up to build my iOS project as part of that. So what I can do is very, very simply, I'm just going to say add. I'm going to add a new app. And in here, it's going to say, oh, hey, where are you going to get this from? Now, if you're getting it from GitHub, that's absolutely fine. Bitbucket, GitLab, all fine. However, if I'm doing it from VSTS, then I need to basically give it a Git repo. So you can see here, it just wants a URL for that. I'm going to flip over to my code here. So there's my Quaint project. In here, I've got the option to clone, and I can use HTTPS or SSH. So if you do SSH, because it's a private repo, it wants this, it tells you exactly, it's a nice, very easy to follow, setting up your own SSH keys. But I can go and grab that. In fact, let me just copy it. And then I can go back to Bitrise and say, hey, look, there you go. There's my repo. And then it goes, okay, what do you need to do? I need to give it an SSH key. I go and get my private key, I throw it in there, and it sets up my build for me. Then what I'm going to do, rather than going through that all nice now, I'm just going to delete that one. I just create it. Taking a little bit of a chance that it's going to completely screw that up. No, we're good. And then I'm just going to click into this. And then, so that build is set up. I've got my workflow that I can go and mess around with. We'll do that in a second. But if I just go to code, then I'm saying, okay, well, I want to kick this thing off. There's a little section down here on webhooks. So I'll go to my Visual Studio Online, VSTS, and it says, oh, here you go. Here is a URL which will essentially request that this build happens. So I can take that and then flip back to my, my Visual Studio. I'm in my Acquaint project. I'm going to go to my settings. I'll go to service hooks. And then I've got a few set up already. I've got one here. It basically says if any code is pushed to a certain repo, in fact, let's go and edit this one. If any code is pushed to a certain repo, so it's my Acquaint master branch, if anything gets pushed there, I want you to call this URL. So effectively, I've now set up CI for a completely different build system. Very, very simple to do. It'll kick it off, and in fact, if you flip into the Acquaint build on Bitrise, I can go to my workflow. If you prefer this, that's fine. You can go in here. I can add in custom things. If I go for something like Xamarin, then what I'll see in there is my Xamarin Test Cloud for Android. Great. So the stuff that I'm going to do now in VSTS, I can do in Bitrise, and I can still integrate it really nicely. Bitrise got lots of integration, so choose what you want. And again, do it with Jenkins, do it with Travis, do it with whatever you use. Okay, so we now got some code in there. We've got a CI build set up. How am I doing for time? Better speed it up a little bit. And so what we want to do is we want to go and test some, create some tests for that code. We've got a little app that we can use. So I'm going to flip over to my Xamarin Test Cloud. And the Xamarin Test Cloud, as I said, is essentially a device cloud. It's 2,500 physical devices. In fact, let's look at this one first. And these are the devices that are in the cloud. And you go, okay, well, you know what? I've got a few devices. Yeah, we've got some Samsung Galaxy S7s. We've got a few older ones in there. But how do you manage that? How do you make sure that you're getting the device coverage that your users are going to be accessing your app with? So what I can do is I can come in here. I can have a look. You can see this number. This is a live site. This changes this number. It's about 2,500. Sometimes it goes up a little bit. Sometimes it goes down a little bit, depending on what they're doing with the devices. But I might say, okay, well, let's choose iOS. So show me all the iOS devices. And I can dive in there and say, okay, well, we've got a few of these. We've got a few iPads kicking around. That's fine. Has anybody got an iPod Touch anymore? I haven't seen anybody use an iPod in quite some time. But people are sitting in their bedrooms with their iPod Touches, using your app and accessing it. Does your app behave correctly on there? If I take something like, let's go for an iPhone 6. So if I dive into the iPhone 6, it goes, okay, here's some more details. This is the screen resolution. This is the processor that's in there. This is the screen dimensions, the screen resolution. And it also says, okay, well, there are 87 of those in the device cloud at this time. So it's not a case of we have one or two of them plugged in. We've got 87 iPhone 6s that you can then use. But the most important thing is this, the operating systems. So I think it's shipped with iOS 8, if I'm not mistaken. And some of those have been upgraded to 802, versions of 9, and of course versions of 10. So again, if you're my wife and you've got the iPhone 6, it's going to be sitting there in iOS 8. But any of you guys, it'll probably be on 10. So you want to test on the iPhone 6, but you want to test it on the various operating systems that you might be encountering. So let's do that. Let's go and write a quick test, and we'll plug that in to our test cloud. So we've got my Acquaint app here. I can see my tests that have been run. Actually, we'll choose this one, a failing test. And this is the tests that are included with the acquaint sample. So if you want to have a little play around with these, you can download the sample. You can just use the APK that's included. You can test this black box. You don't have to worry about the Xamarin app. Or you can take your own app, plug it into Xamarin Studio, set up a little project. But these test methods are essentially included with the sample. You can go and have a play around with them. There are a couple of key metrics here. We had 289 minutes of device time. So that was 289 minutes of automated testing on your app, clicking buttons, entering text, and seeing how it performs. That took 40 minutes as part of my build. So if your manual testers are doing it, they're doing 280 minutes. If you're doing it automated, you bring that down to 40 minutes and you're getting that feedback. Now, in this case, what I might say is dive in, have a look at all the things. Now, I can't remember how many tests. I think it was like 21 devices or something I stuck on there. So you can see all the devices side by side. And then I can start to walk through and see what those devices, let's open up that a little bit, all those devices, what they're doing side by side at any point during the test. And I can dive into there and say, I don't know, let's give me what was my Pixel in there? I'm sure I put the new Google Pixel in. Of course, I can't see it, but it doesn't really matter. We'll just use, there's the Nexus 6P on Android 7. And so, again, I can go in and look at that device and see how it's performing on my little sample app. I've got information here like CPU usage, memory usage as we go through it. I've got my test log. So again, the end output, what's happening on the tests. I've got the device log if I want some more lower level details about what was happening. And of course, if I look through this, I can see that one of these tests failed. So I'll look through and say, right, what went wrong? And straight away, you're looking at the Nexus 6 and going, well, something's gone wrong there. At this point in time, something has blown up. And of course, the test is failing here because it thinks it's looking for a certain element on the screen. Of course, it's not there anymore. Something's gone wrong. Now, I don't know actually know what went wrong on this device, but that would prompt me to go and do some more investigation. Do we have a problem on this Android version? Do we have a problem on this particular device and the flavor that it's running? Do we have a problem with this form factor? Let's do some tests and figure out what the situation was. And that's fine. Typically, little things you find are really simple things. You've got your app, you go and log in, you're testing it on your large form factor device, and it's absolutely fine. But of course, someone then uses a 4-inch screen, and the button that you need to press to log in is now covered over by the on-screen keyboard. And so those are the little things that on your high-end devices maybe you're not seeing. So very easy to see those in Test Cloud. So what I'm going to do a new test run. And if I do that, what I'm effectively doing here is choosing what it is I want to run on what devices. So I'm just going to do a new Android. And it's iOS or Android. Doesn't matter whether it's a Xamarin app at all. It can be native, it can be hybrid, doesn't matter. So I'm going to choose new Android app. I'm going to choose one of my teams. I'll just choose my Microsoft team. Hit next on that. And this is where I get to choose those devices. And I can look at this and say, well, okay, show me all the phones, show me all the tablets, show me all maybe the Samsung devices in there. I just want to see Samsung. Or what I typically do is say, okay, well, just show me all the 711 devices. So there's my Google Pixel, my Nexus 6P, and that kind of good stuff. And I'll choose a few of those. And then I might say, well, you know what? I need to get some Android 5 devices. So let's choose all those. I might grab, I don't know, an S4 or an S6 and throw that in. And I can choose what I want. And as I'm doing that, I can stick in as many as I want in there. It's upping this number. So you can see here, select 7 devices. I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to choose the name of the test series. Again, are these smoke tests, CI test, release test, beta test, just a flag or a tag to say what it is I'm running. Set up my system language. So again, this is me going onto my device, choosing French or German, and then seeing how the app performs in that. I'll leave it as UK for now and hit next on there. And then this is the magic dialog. This gives you all you need to go and push tests into Test Cloud. You've got 3 choices at the minute. This will probably change. In fact, I know it will change when the feature flags change. But you've got three options for authoring these tests. The first one, the kind of where it started, is Calabash. Calabash is a very popular open source test framework. It's now maintained by Xamarin, or Microsoft, I guess. And it's all written in Ruby. So if you want to write your test, if you've got an existing investment in Ruby, you want to use Ruby to write your test, absolutely fine. Go and install the Ruby gems, install the test cloud gems, and then start writing your test. And it's kind of a gherkin, cucumber syntax. Given that I do this, and this happens, then I expect this to happen. Very easy to write and generate. And then I just submit that up to the test cloud. And I use, again, this command line to go and do it. They announced Appium support, Java and JUnit to write those. They announced that back in October, I think, last year. So that's kind of going from strength to strength. There are a few limitations. Things like I can only launch one app. I don't have the test.ng, but you've got to use Java and JUnit in the minute. So if you want to use, if you've already got some Appium tests, go and throw them in Test Cloud, see what it happens. You can get a 30-day trial of Test Cloud, go and throw your Appium tests in there and see how they behave. And again, same thing, I've got a command line here that if I went to my terminal window, my command line window, I just run that, and it's going to submit those to Test Cloud. I come from a Visual Studio .NET background. Don't let the Mac fool you. I'm a novice with it. And so I typically go with UI test. UI test is written in C#. It's got very nice integration into Visual Studio, Xamarin Studio, upcoming Visual Studio for Mac. And it also allows me to use the Xamarin Test Recorder. The Xamarin Test Recorder will generate C# for you. So if you haven't written any sort of automated tests, I would possibly suggest take a look at the Xamarin UI test and writing those in C#. So a couple of key things that I need here. And I've got this command line, this testcloud.exe. I'm going to pull down the NuGet package for Xamarin UI test, and that executable is the one that's going to submit it into the test cloud. I just need to give it the path to my APK file, or my IPA file if I'm using iOS. I've got this team API key. This allows me, it's essentially my personal access token, my password if you like. Don't memorize it. Don't record it in the back. And it allows me to submit my tests into Test Cloud. There's my user name. And then the other thing is this. This is my device hash. So those, I forgot what it was, 5 devices that I chose with those operating systems are represented by that device hash. That doesn't go away. So if I want to say to someone, hey, look, I want you to run a test, but run it on these devices. There's the device hash for the devices that I want you to run on. I can give it to them, and they can go off and do it. Just pass that in at the command line, and it's absolutely fine. Am I going to write a test? Let's do a really super quick one, and then we'll come back to that. Okay, let me show you a quick test. So I've got the Acquaint sample here. It's Xamarin Forms. So what you can see if you haven't played around with Xamarin before, I've got essentially a number of projects within the solution. I've got an iOS version, an Android version, and then I've got my essentially portable class library or shared project that's going to go between those. So all my business logic, all that kind of stuff is going to go in there, and then any platform-specific code that I want to write is going into the Android or iOS project. And of course, I can do UWP, Windows 8.1, all that good stuff as well. I've also got some tests written here. So I've got some tests. I've got iOS tests and Android tests. I'm just going to go into my Android tests. And I'm going to go into update data tests, and these are the ones that are included with the project. So you can have a look at these. I can test things black box. I don't need the source code for this. So if I've got someone delivers me an APK or an IPA file, I can just take that and I can start to write tests against it. And in that case, I can just give it a reference here and here. You can see it references the APK file. I take that line out, I'm good to go. But in this case, I've got a reference to the Android project. So you can see in here, I've got a Quaint Xforms Droid. So I've got a reference. So when I run these tests, it knows what I want to test against. So I could happily just go into my little test pad here and go and run one of these. Or I can just very super quickly go and write one of these myself. So let's just do that. Oh man, I'm going to horribly run out of time. Am I going to do this? I don't know if I am. No, I'm not. I'm going to run out of time and I want to show you some other cool stuff. So there's my test. I can use something called the read, evaluate, print loop to essentially allow me to interact with my app and generate this kind of code. What you'll see here, if I just do app dot, let's see if we can zoom that in a bit. No, it doesn't zoom that bit. Okay, that's still good. So what we've got in here, if I do that, I've got things like pinch to zoom, swipe right to left, tap a button, tap and hold, press the back button. Anything that my customers would be doing with my app, how they're going to interact with it, scroll down to a certain element, click that button, enter that data, enter text. It's all in there. Very, very simple to write this stuff. And so I can do that effectively just from the code here. I can go and generate that, the app.REPL, or I can use the Xamarin test recorder. Hopefully I can get to that. There we go. And I'm going to really quickly choose the emulator that I've got running, and I'm going to use my Acquaint Xamarin Forms APK. And it's going to hopefully, you can see at the bottom left, connecting to app, and it's going to deploy the app to my my device here. And this could be a physical device, so actually it works really well. If you've got a physical device plugged in, choose that instead, and then you can interact with it the same way you would do in the normal real world. So I've now got my little app deployed. I'm going to click on record here, and I'm going to just say, let's do use local data source. There we go. So I'm going to type that in. I'm going to click the continue button, and as I'm doing that, move this over here, you can see that it's generating that same code for me. So I can write this myself, that's absolutely fine. But if I just want to get a little bit of a head start in identifying the elements that I want to interact with, then I can do this through the recorder. And then I can do things like, if I scroll down here, you can see we should get an app.scroll down. And then when I'm done with that, and I can enter text and do what I like and stop that, I can then go to export. I can send that straight to the Xamarin Test Cloud if I wanted. I can play it back and see if my record and playback has worked. Probably what I'm going to want to do is copy the output, flip back to my project, and paste it in there. I have a new test. I kick that off, and I've got a new test in here. What I want to do is now go and check that in, but I also want to run it as part of my CI build. Now, interest of time, we are going to have to flip on here a little bit. I'm going to go to my my build. Let me flip back to that now. I'm going to go to my build, and I'm going to edit that build definition. And if I do that, this is the build definition that I set up. And there's a couple of extra things that I changed. Number one, it's going to version my Android package. So I set up a really, really simple little regular expression that goes and looks in my Android manifest, makes a change to the version code number that it's going to build. So when I push this into Hockey app, it's updated all my version numbers. I don't have to mess around with that stuff. And I don't see all the same version and code version in Hockey app. So I've stuck that in there. I'm building my project. I'm building my test project. I'm going to sign my APK with my certificate in here, my key store passwords in there, and then I'm going to enable the Xamarin Test Cloud project task. And there's a couple of things. Team API key. Oh, we're going to get that. Oh, I know where I can get that. I can flip back to my project. There's my Team API key. I can just grab that out of there, stick it into my build. I need the device hash. Oh, we saw that before. I can go get my device hash and push it in there. What series will I run? Again, it's that tag that I was doing. So all the information you were putting into the little wizard, I just throw it into my build task, and I'm good to go. The one thing I've done here is I've just changed these, rather than hard coding it, I put a little parameter in here. And in fact, let's do this. I'm going to change this. So one device. So on the fly, just by changing the build, I'm changing and saying, don't run it in 21 devices, because we're never going to have time for that. Let's just do it in one device, and we might just about see it. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to stick that off. And if I go and commit something, it's going to kick off that build, because it's set up a CI build. I'm just going to queue a new one, and we might get a chance of seeing that complete. Running on here, and hit OK. And now that's going to kick off my build, build my code, build my test code, submit it into Test Cloud, test it on, in this case, just one device, then come back to me and tell me, package everything up, and hopefully we're good to go, and everything will be fine. I'm not going to sit and watch that, but you can see how exciting it is to see all your build running there. And then the next thing I want to do is flip into my release. Now I have a release set up. Oh, horribly light on time. I have a release set up here. I've got my, if I edit that, there's my acquaint release. I'm going to edit that release there. And what I've done is I've set up 3 environments. Number 1, I've got the private beta, public beta, store release. The private beta is where I want to push it out to Hockey App. And what I've said is, if a new continuous deployment, if a new build happens on that particular build that we were just kicking off, and it completes and everything's fine, I want you to submit that release. Now, you might not want to do that, automate it. You might want to have at least a manual process in there. That's fine. But it's going to kick that off, and then it's going to deploy it to Hockey App. So I've hooked Hockey App into my account. Very simple to do. I've got this thing here, an app ID, and that identifies all this app that I'm testing, and it's going to identify any crash analytics, any user feedback, any deployment to that one app within Hockey App. Very simple to set up. I've got some comprehensive release notes in there about what we're pushing out. And then I might say, okay, when we move to a public beta, I want to assign some approvers in there. So I don't want to just push this stuff straight out. I want someone to do some pre-deployment improvement. And I can say specific users, and I could stick my colleague in there maybe, and I can say anybody in this list in a certain order, or just one user is fine. So I can basically say, you know, people get jumpy when you do things like automated deployments, put plenty of sort of checks and balances, if you like, before you push it out. Absolutely very simple to do, and it can do it at each level. I get a little email saying, hey, can you go and approve this? I go into the portal, and it's fine. And then I need to add some tasks. And of course, it's public beta, so I'm going to push it out to things. So I'm going to find, in this case, maybe the Google Play or the App Store or the Windows Store, whatever I want. And I'm going to push it in there. I'm going to add that task in. I'm going to give it the path to my APK that comes out of the other build. And then I'm going to say things like, I'm going to put it into the beta track. I'm going to give it some release notes. And I'm doing exactly the same as I'm doing for Hockey App. But it's automated and very simple. So let's flip to Hockey App. Go to Hockey App. Not Hockey App. There we go. There we go. Hockey App. Now, you can see here, I've got version 2 of my Acquaint app in there. And then each time I build, it's incrementing the build number and sticking that into the code version as it sprays this out to Hockey App. So if that build completes and we get it through, then it's going to deploy into Hockey App. This is what I did, I think, just this morning, 20th of Jan. Hasn't had any downloads yet because I only just did it. But if I now take out my phone and try and launch the Acquaint app on my phone, I'm going to get a notification to say, hey, there's a new version of this. You're not allowed to run the version you have. You must upgrade it. It'll redirect me to Hockey App. I'll install the update, and then I'm off using the latest version. That app ID is the same as we just saw in VSTS. And of course, if I go to things like crashes, any crashes that are happening on the Acquaint app, in my version of the Acquaint app, are now going to be sent back to Hockey App. And of course, here's one here. I've got an issue. It's already tracked. And if I click on tracked, what's it going to do? It's going to take me back to VSTS and the bug that was created by Hockey App into VSTS. So this is effectively one of my users hitting a problem. It then sends it back to Hockey App. Hockey App goes, oh, that's a problem. Let me create a bug, send it back to VSTS. I then set up an alert that says, if a new bug comes out of Hockey App, I want to know about it. We do a triage. Is this important? Yeah, it's pretty important. On the backlog it goes. And we've got that feedback loop coming right through. The one other thing you might want to check out here is things like the custom events. So I just threw in a really simple one into this. So just include the Hockey App SDK. I've got 2 little events in here. Basically, the demo app gets started. I've got like 600 of those nearly, because again, I'm running it through Test Cloud, and my tests will start the app. And then I've got one in here that I've only managed to do once, which is somebody changes the settings on the app, I wanted to know that that was happening, and I did that manually once myself. I must include it in a test, so I see a few more in there. And again, very simple to add into your code, but I'm getting that information back saying, hey, we've got crashes, we've got feedback, or we've got things happening, people are using the right options, or maybe ignoring that. I can send a push notification, say, hey, why is nobody checking out the new cool page that we've got? Push notification, people go, okay, let me check it out, it's fine. So that is Hockey App. I reckon I've got 2 minutes to show you some cool stuff that's coming down the line. Let's go back to my slide. There we go. Visual Studio Mobile Center. Announced last October at the Connect event. If you haven't checked this out, worth taking a look at. You'll notice there when I did this in VSTS, Hockey App, Xamarin Test Cloud, I've got to go to the different portals. This isn't a replacement for VSTS. It's going to sit side by side with it. But what it's going to do is take all that connection into Azure, take all the crash reporting, the feedback, the builds, and stick it into one place. This is what it looks like, if I can just get to it. It's new, you can go sign up. It was private beta, but you can go and sign up for it now. If you look down the left-hand side, these are the beacons. These might look pretty familiar. I've got build, I've got test, distribute. Then I've got some Azure features, so easy tables and identity and authentication. Then I've got things like crashes and analytics. So if you use things like Xamarin Insights in the past, I might want to say, well, okay, well, where is my app being used? What are people using? I've got all my analytics down there. So looks very similar. I can do iOS and Android builds of native applications, Xamarin Forms, Xamarin Native, React Native, and things like UWP and other things should be coming as well. Cordova and stuff will be coming as well. But there's my builds. I can see those are kicking off, pulling straight out of GitHub. I go to my test. If I flip in there, and what we'll see, oh, we've got some nice tests. Looks kind of familiar. And then if I dive into this, what I'll see is exactly the same stuff. So here's all my tests running on those devices, and I can move through that exactly as I was doing within the Test Cloud portal. Now, if you're using Test Cloud, don't wait for this stuff. Go and use it. If you're using Test Cloud, you'll eventually migrate across to the Mobile Center portal. Same with Hockey App. Use Hockey App now, and you'll see your results side by side. You'll see that in Mobile Center. So Mobile Center is kind of the, I suppose, if you like, the new Xamarin portal. Most things will move towards that. There will be integration into VSTS as well. At the minute, it's only pulling out of GitHub, but you'll see things side by side there as well. I've got all my distribution the same way we just did with Hockey App. I've got my Azure stuff, and then I've got things like my crashes, and then also the analytics and my additional stuff in here. So I'm starting to see some nice little graphs, active users, and you can see it's I've got to say it's prettier than Hockey App, which is not particularly difficult. Can anybody guess where our device lab lives at the minute? If you look at where the usage is coming from, these are the tests that have been running through the app. But you're going to see a lot more metrics and stuff coming into that. So if you haven't signed up for Mobile Center, go and take a look. When you sign in, you'll get a little pop-up saying, hey, would you like a little run through? And one of the guys, whether it be me or one of the guys in the US, will take you through and just do a little bit of a longer demo, a little bit of an introduction, show you how to get started with that stuff. It's moving at a very fast cadence, well worth checking out. I think I'm over time, which is very disappointing because there's lots of cool stuff. I think I've got through it all, but I would like to spend some more time on that. But hopefully that was useful. I'll go and get some lunch, recover, get some caffeine down you, and then push on through and go to that Test Cloud demo session straight after this. One of our partners doing a Test Cloud session specifically on UI testing and Test Cloud. And then last session of the day, mobile apps and Azure, well worth checking out. Thank you very much.